Hey everyone, John here, and welcome to Bayros Books. On this channel we talk about Appendix N book reviews, miniature painting, wargaming, and especially tonight, fantasy role-playing. First I want to say thanks to everyone tuning in, both new viewers and old subscribers. For those not in the know, I'm in the North Carolina Army National Guard, and we had our hands full last fall with hurricane relief. While the mountain regions are certainly in much better shape now than they were then, they still have a long way to go, so please keep them in your prayers. When I'm not on active duty, I'm a stay-at-home dad. I had another baby last winter, so that's kept me too busy to post new videos. But don't worry, things are starting to calm down now around these parts, so I should be able to get at least one new video out a month. Now let's catch everyone up to speed. Back in August, RumpDM put out the call on X for players for his Advanced Dungeons & Dragons 1st Edition campaign using the browser setting. I found myself with a bit of free time, sent in my interest form, and in short notice found myself in command of the Bear Tribe, a tribe of cavemen from the Conclave of Six, an alliance of caveman tribes led by the immortal Caius, the First Man. Noting my tribe's position on the map was uncomfortably close to the little green men to the north, I made my case to Caius that the Bear Tribe should go on a great hunt to find a beast capable of tipping the scales in our favor. Permission was given and the party was sent out. In case you didn't see it, the one and only Mr. Wargaming himself was given the mission to play out, and you should definitely check it out. We lost a few cavemen, but gained the white-hot worm, a formidable Remoraz. My shaman took charge of taming the beast, but before adjudication was given, the world itself shifted. Rump had a baby. God bless him and his family. But it meant that he had to step down from the campaign. After a moment of pause, the torch was passed to a foolish Antanius, who informed me that the white-hot worm would not be so easy to tame. I had to find a solution. Knowing the frogs of Frogtown had recently been weakened in battle, and knowing that the foul creatures toyed with fell sorceries, I figured they may have something I could use to tame the white-hot worm. Unfortunately, by the time the Conclave's war parties arrived, the frogs had dispersed, leaving little behind. However, rumor had it that the ruined Jotun temple in the northern mountains may have the answer to the riddle. I sent out a party at once, but never received words of the results of the quest. After taking care of some real-life stuff, I realized that time was fast approaching for weekly orders, and I still didn't know what had become of my guys. Antanius put the ball in my court to run it solo, but of course, as all bros must, I had to post receipts. It was an offer I couldn't refuse, the perfect opportunity for me to jump back into YouTube and learn AD&D at the same time. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to do it in one night like I thought I could. It took a week, and the raw footage was over 6 hours, mostly with me flipping through the books, off-screen, looking for rules. While I intended on having at least most of the footage up there to prove my roles and approximate Mr. Wargaming's great video, I have to be honest, my video kinda sucked. What I'm going to do instead is retell the tale, intersperse it with footage at times, and show you the results. I think that'll make for a much shorter, more digestible, and much more enjoyable experience for everyone involved. You'll have to take me at my word for my roles, but trust me, you'll see that I'm not pulling my punches. When randomly designing dungeons using Appendix A, you can get absolutely sprawling dungeons with potentially unlimited number of rooms and levels. To keep this from happening, we had to set some parameters. We know that there's a specific reward here, which is the ability to tame the white-hot worm. I went with the potion of animal control, which will have to be slightly modified to allow it to control the white-hot worm. I know it's not strictly rules as written, but it's the best thing I could find in the time crunch that I had to approximate what I needed. I'm already behind on orders, and I can't be going through 15 levels of dungeons with 30 rooms to each level. I have to move faster than that. To mitigate that issue, here's what I'll do. First, I figured out how many levels the dungeon has, and how many rooms were there per level. I did this by rolling a d3 to determine how many levels were in the dungeon, then rolling 3d3 per level to determine how many rooms. I ended up with 3 levels with 6 rooms apiece. I utilized the dungeon generator in Appendix A, which gave us our corridors and rooms and told us what was in those rooms. The party will go down to the next level when we hit some stairs that lead us there, or if we get to the 6th room of that floor. Similarly, when we reach the 6th room of the 3rd floor, if we haven't already found the potion of animal control, that's where it'll be. Next, I figured out the dungeon's denizens. We know that the dungeon is a Jotun temple, but it's also ruined. That means there may be giants, but not definitely. Thankfully, we know that the dungeon is in the Arctic Mountains, so I was able to utilize those tables to help fill out our monster roster. The DM's guide also has some great tables for generating dungeon denizens depending on level. I ended up with frost giants anyway, along with winter wolves, which isn't entirely unexpected since there's a possibility of them being present with frost giants anyway, but here's something interesting. We also got some herd animals as well. Perhaps the remnants of the ancient frost giant civilization that once held these ruins sent a party to try to re-establish it, and they've brought along their herd of mountain goats to snack on while they're adventuring. The frost giants are not layered here, not yet, so they won't have any sort of horde. I hoped we'd find some treasure squirreled away in here, but I guess you'll have to see. In total, we got 8 frost giants and 5 winter wolves, but I'm not going to worry so much about how many herd animals they've got. I would like to note that I couldn't easily find any information on how many creatures resided in a layer, even though I didn't have to use that rule. In Old School Essentials, there are 2 entries for number appearing, the first being the number wandering in a dungeon, the second being the number layering in a dungeon or wandering in the wilderness, and you multiply that second entry by 5 to determine the number layering in the wilderness. I couldn't find a rule like that off the cuff in either the Dungeon Master's Guide or the Monster Manual, so please let me know in the comments where I can find a rule for that. Before getting into the adventure, I had to figure out our party's composition. I brought one of my tribe's champion, the hero Cody, as well as 10 cave bears, a bear tamer named Kanai, and 30 cavemen. Also, we were joined by a party from the Yun, absolute bros, with 4 mammoth riders, 3 of whom were clerics and 1 of whom was a fighter, along with 10 reindeer archer riders. Now, that's a lot of dudes, and it'd be a real headache to try to run that whole army through the dungeon. What I did instead was treat the soldiers as mercenaries until we got inside the dungeon, then as henchmen for the characters once we got there. So for instance, Cody has a charisma of 12, which means that he can take 5 cavemen with him. My bear trainer Kanai is going to be limited to only 3 of her cave bears at a time. Now the Yun player told me how many guys he sent, but not their stats or anything along those lines, so I had to roll those guys up. For a more in-depth look at character generation, make sure you guys check out Scudder for Mike's great video on using Dundermoose's 20 flippin' steps to rolling up a 1E character, which is available on DriveThruRPG. Now that we know enough about our dungeon and our party to get started, let's crack some skulls. I determined that the frost giants would have some sort of guarding party outside, 3 giants and 3 winter wolves, which served a dual purpose, guarding the site and herding the goats. The giants were not taken by surprise, and they got initiative. The winter wolves leapt into action, and an entire squad of reindeer riders got taken out by the winter wolves' icy breath, and the giants threw boulders, which crashed around our forces, battering one of the Yun riders badly. However, the bear tribe is quick to avenge our Yun friends, surrounding the winter wolves and charging fearlessly at the giants. After a couple of rounds and a few dead cavemen, the guards were dead, and the way into the temple was clear. Perhaps a bit overconfident from the battle outside, Cody led the forward party into the dungeon. The first room contained unguarded treasure, 750 electrum coins. We pocketed the change and kept moving, coming across what must have been a sort of campsite for the giants. 3 giants and 2 winter wolves crowded this room, a few sleeping. The party was able to catch them off guard and slew one of the winter wolves before it awoke, but the momentum was quickly lost. The tight quarters and overextension of the forward party left them way out of position, and they were overwhelmed by the might of the giants. Cody died in the fight as the other heroes tried to break through the giants' lines, but he took another frost giant with him. To make matters worse, 3 cave bears died as the party was pushed back and was forced to retreat back to camp. The giants decided to stay in the more fortified position of the dungeon, but our first attempt ended with the defeated party making camp as the dark clouds of a blizzard darkened the horizon. Their next attempt had to be successful if they wanted to make it back in time before the blizzard hit. With our party rested, healed, and reinforced, we pushed back into the dungeon. The giants, though diminished, were not giving up their prize without a fight. A giant guarded the entrance with a stack of boulders to throw if given the chance. We didn't give him that chance. Seizing the initiative, we rushed forward and positioned ourselves advantageously around him, keeping him from retreat and pounding him with our weapons and the forward bear. The giant managed to kill a few cavemen before we killed him, but the way was clear. However, as we continued down the corridor, we found another frost giant. this time accompanied by a winter wolf. They must have been following the sounds of the fight. Once again, we seized the initiative and killed the winter wolf before its devastating breath could be unleashed on us. Without his wolf, the frost giant fell in fairly short order. We moved through the southern passages until they reached a dead end. Then we moved through the northern passages. We found a clutch of giant toads, but they didn't want anything to do with us and fled before we could get close to them. We journeyed northwards for several turns, missing a pile of coins hidden with an invisibility spell before coming upon a trap door that emptied into the second level. In a stroke of luck, the chamber that the trap door emptied into was an elevator that took us to the third level. However, the mechanism jammed and would not go back up. We were very close to our goal, but would have to wander through the depths of the ruins to find our way back up. Fortunately, within a few turns, we found the last remaining frost giants guarding their treasure, the potion of animal control. We caught them completely off guard and were able to take them out before they knew what hit them. A few turns later, our torches were starting to run out. We started with 10 and had used 5 by the time we slew the last of the frost giants. Fortunately, just as I started to get worried, we found the stairs to the second level. The second floor was even more circuitous than the first level, with long, looping passages that inevitably ended with dead ends. My hope for our dwindling torch supply started to run out. Even worse, we were suddenly surprised by a band of bandits, ostensibly after the same treasure as us. Through sheer luck, one of the cave bears was blocking the passageway from the rest of the bandits, and while the bear was reduced to single hit points, he survived long enough for the priests of Yun to rescue him with some well-timed cure-light wounds. This bear is the real MVP of this fight, since the enemy couldn't get around him to fight the cavemen, but the cavemen couldn't get around him either. He nearly soloed the entire squad of bandits with only a few healing spells as support. However, now out of spells and lighting our last torch, I held my breath as the dice finally resulted in stairs leading back to the first floor. Better yet, to a square that was already mapped, leading us straight to the dungeon's entrance. This was an incredibly challenging dungeon. The frost giants were absolute tanks, and the winter wolves were nightmares for close formations. We very nearly lost both our heroes and almost ran out of light, which would have certainly spelled doom for us. Thankfully, Caius must have been looking out for us because we made it out of there in the nick of time. That said, I sure hope that Remoraz is worth the trouble we went through, because we didn't get much else besides that potion. 750 electrum in exchange for 1 level 4 fighter, 3 cave bears, 11 cavemen, and 5 Yun reindeer riders. It was a pitiful gift, but I gave all the coins to the Yun tribe. It's a sad day indeed for the bear tribe. At the same time, we were conducting another quest, and another one of my heroes, Champion Grizz, died in the fighting. Since this video is actually coming out a bit late, I'm taking that to mean that in the meanwhile, the bear tribe has been mourning the loss of its sons. But now we're ready. With our potion of animal control, the white-hot worm is ours to command. Watch out, denizens of Brozer. The bear tribe is back in action. Let's take a second here before logging off to see what went well, what needs fixing, and how I can take these lessons into future campaigns. I couldn't find the rule to determine the number appearing in a layer. Fortunately, I didn't really need it, and 8 frost giants was plenty of challenge. However, when I eventually run my own AD&D campaign, that's info I'll need. I'll need to find that before I can get started. I feel like I wasn't getting combat right, particularly when it came to things like flanking, rear attacks, surprise. Let's just call it the whole thing. I need to revisit the combat rules to make sure I'm giving everyone the bonuses and penalties they've earned and deserve. I also completely left out special maneuvers like charging, which probably would have helped both me and the bad guys during surprise segments. I used the morale rules during the initial combat outside the ruins, and I completely forgot to use them at all inside the dungeon. When I did use it, I'm not sure I got it right. I'm pretty sure I would have needed to have taken some morale checks for my side too, particularly after that first disastrous delve. . Whether it's making sure you actually have enough torches to get through the dungeon, or making sure you've got your marching order set, a little prep goes a long way in a delve. Once I had my marching order set and a general idea of what I wanted to do, it was a lot easier to get through the dungeon. Don't get cocky, especially if you're rolling up on a frost giant with nothing but a pelt, a stone axe, and a bit too much confidence to defend yourself with. Make sure you use your henchmen and hirelings wisely, otherwise you'll end up like the late great Cody. I think that about covers the most pressing issues I had while running this dungeon. Thanks for coming along with me on this journey, for sticking around to the end, and for excusing the video format. I promise you would not have enjoyed it the other way. I hope you enjoyed it this way, had some fun, and maybe learned a little something along the way. I know I did. If you like this video, please make sure to give me a thumbs up and a subscribe if you haven't already, and make sure to check out my Substack for more content. I've committed to posting there about once every other week and posting a new video once a month. I hope to see you here again soon. Until then, I appreciate you.